Sir, I know how to make your son walk again, the black beggar girl told the millionaire. Franklin Hayes had walked past that alley off Clark Street 100 times, but never like this, never with the dull hum of wheelchair wheels replacing the patter of sneakers, never with silence so heavy it made the city noise feel far away. His son Tyler sat quietly in the wheelchair, wrapped in a faded Chicago Cubs blanket. The boy's sandy hair was tousled, his eyes fixed on the cracks in the sidewalk as if counting them gave him purpose. He was 10 years old, but he hadn't stood in over 18 months. Franklin, once named the man who flipped Chicago by Forbes, had built a real estate empire from broken buildings and boarded-up blocks. He had turned blight into billion-dollar views. But all the money, all the influence couldn't restore movement to the legs his son had lost after a skiing accident in Vail. The doctors had been precise: T6 vertical fracture with spinal cord trauma, permanent damage. The words had replayed in Franklin's head like a broken record that mocked him with every tick of the second hand. Hope, once his fuel, had become his tormentor. That's when he heard the voice. "Sir," the girl said again, clearer this time. "I know how to make your son walk again." Franklin turned, his grip tightening on the push handles of the chair. He expected some adult hustler, someone trying to sell a miracle oil or new age scam, but instead, a small girl stepped out from behind a dented recycling bin. She looked maybe 8, brown skin, big brown eyes that carried weight far beyond her years. Her hoodie was torn at the elbow, jeans smeared with city grime, and she wore shoes held together with duct tape. But her posture was straight, her voice steady. "Excuse me?" Franklin asked, his voice a mix of irritation and disbelief. "I said I can help your son," the girl repeated. "My name's Laya. I live in the church shelter on Wells. I saw you two yesterday." He looked really sad. Tyler glanced at her, not with fear or pity, but curiosity. It was the first time in days Franklin had seen him look at anything with interest. "You've been watching us?" Franklin asked. "Only a little," she said, shifting her weight. "I sit on the corner most days. A lot of people walk by, but you stopped, you picked up a glove he dropped, you didn't just rush away. I figured you might listen." Franklin frowned, glancing down at Tyler, who was still watching the girl. "My son's injury isn't sadness, young lady, it's neurological damage. His spine hasn't forgotten, just shut down." Laya interrupted softly. "That's what my grandmother used to say. Sometimes the body doesn't stop because it's broken, it stops because the heart is tired." Franklin was about to dismiss her when Tyler's small voice broke in. "Dad, maybe we could just see." He hadn't asked for anything in weeks, not TV, not dessert, not even a story before bed. But now he was asking to follow a barefoot girl from an alley. Franklin closed his eyes, exhaled long and hard. "If anything feels wrong," he said to Tyler, "we're leaving." "Deal," Tyler nodded, the corners of his mouth twitching, not quite a smile, but something close. "Follow me," Laya said, already turning. They walked through the underbelly of the city, away from Michigan Avenue and into forgotten streets, where the buildings leaned inward and the air smelled like rust and yesterday's rain. Franklin hesitated at every turn, wheeling Tyler over uneven sidewalks, avoiding broken glass and loose bricks. Still, something kept him following. Maybe it was Laya's calmness, maybe it was Tyler's quiet hope, or maybe Franklin was too exhausted to fight anything anymore. They reached a narrow courtyard behind a crumbling row of brownstones. An old wooden door, half hidden by ivy and faded graffiti, creaked open without a knock. Inside was a room lit only by sunlight streaming through holes in the ceiling. It smelled faintly of lemon balm and old books. On a worn rug near a small stove sat a woman, her silver hair wrapped in a bun the size of a grapefruit, her skin as dark as Laya's and mapped with age. "I was wondering when you'd bring him," she said to Laya, her voice as smooth as river stones. Franklin stiffened. "How did you know?" She looked at him gently. "I don't know the future, sir, but I know pain, and I know when it walks through my door." Tyler leaned forward, eyes wide. "Who are you?" The woman smiled, kneeling beside his chair. "Just someone who listens. May I touch your knees?" Tyler looked to his father. Franklin, heart thumping with doubt and a flicker of something else, fear maybe, or hope, nodded slowly. The woman placed her hands on Tyler's knees. Her fingers were rough, warm, steady. Her eyes closed, and a soft hum escaped her lips, a tune as old as wind, as tender as bedtime stories long forgotten. Tyler jerked slightly. "I felt something," he whispered, "like electricity, but soft." Franklin leaned forward, gripping the armrest. "What do you mean felt?" The woman opened her eyes. "His body remembers more than he thinks." "That's not medical science," Franklin said. "No," the woman agreed, "but science doesn't sit beside a boy when he thinks he's invisible." She turned to Tyler. "Do you want to try to stand?" Tyler swallowed, then nodded. She helped him carefully. His legs wobbled, his arms shook. Franklin lurched forward, but the woman stopped him with a raised hand. Tyler's left foot shifted, then the right. He stood. Franklin fell to his knees, eyes burning. "Ty," he whispered, "oh, God, Ty." Tyler stood, shaky and wide-eyed, his arms hovering at his sides as if the very air might hold him. His legs, frail from disuse, trembled under his weight, but he was upright. Franklin's breath caught in his throat. The world around him faded. The broken windows, the drafty ceiling, the ancient rug beneath their feet, all dissolved into the miracle unfolding just inches away. Tyler looked at his father, a grin beginning to pull at the corners of his mouth, unsure, disbelieving. Franklin surged forward but didn't catch him. He didn't want to. He knelt, arms extended but not touching, like a witness, afraid his presence might break the spell. Tyler took a step. It was small, more of a shuffle than a stride, but it was his own. He took another, then his knees buckled, and he began to fall. This time, Franklin caught him, holding him close, pressing his face into the side of Tyler's head as the boy shook with sobs. "I felt it, Dad," he whispered. "I felt my legs, I really did." Franklin could only nod, his voice caught somewhere between a cry and a prayer. Laya stood silently nearby, her small hands tucked into the oversized sleeves of her sweatshirt, her eyes calm, not smug, not triumphant, just still. The old woman stepped back, her hands folded, her expression one of peaceful expectation, as though she'd seen this scene many times before. Franklin turned to her, his face streaked with tears. "I need to know," he said quietly, "how you did that. I need to understand." The woman's gaze didn't shift. "There's not much to understand. The body obeys the heart more than we admit. When the spirit shuts down, the limbs follow. Your son stopped believing, but today, for the first time in a long time, he trusted what he couldn't see." "That's not how healing works," Franklin said, but the words lacked conviction. "No," she replied gently. "Tell me then, how do you explain what just happened?" He didn't answer, he couldn't. He turned to Laya instead. "Who are you really?" Laya looked down, brushing a curl from her cheek. Just a girl who listened to stories. My grandma raised me when nobody else would. She said, people don't always need fixing, sometimes they just need reminding they're not broken. She stepped forward, kneeling beside Tyler. I was born with a bent foot. Kids laughed, grown-ups stared. I couldn't run, couldn't play. Then one day, Grandma sat me down on this very rug, put her hand on my ankle, and hummed just like today. She didn't ask me to believe, she didn't even say she could heal me, she just said, stand if you can, so I did. Tyler looked at her, eyes wide, and it worked? Laya smiled. I never limped again. Franklin stood slowly, turning back to the woman. Where is she now, your grandmother? Laya's smile faded, she looked away. Gone almost a year. Stroke, her voice cracked slightly, the only sign of her grief. They put me in a foster home after that. I ran after 3 days. Nobody believed her stories, said she was a fake, a con, said I made it all up. So, you live in the streets? Franklin asked softly. Laya nodded. Church shelter most nights, sometimes the back of a bakery near Southport, but I'm okay, I help people sometimes, just like she did. You shouldn't have to live like that, Franklin said, you're just a kid. A lot of us are just kids, Laya replied, but the streets don't care, the world forgets us unless we make it impossible to ignore. Franklin looked down at Tyler, who had shifted upright in his arms, his fingers twitching with cautious excitement. I want to help you, Franklin said to Laya. I have means, people. I can get you a home, education, safety. Laya shook her head. Thank you, but this is where I'm needed, on corners where no one looks, among people who think hope is for someone else. That's where Grandma always said healing begins. Franklin felt torn, the weight of privilege pressing against the raw truth of Laya's words. She didn't want saving, she wanted purpose, and somehow she already had it. Still, he pulled a business card from his coat pocket, crisp and embossed with his name and office number. If you ever change your mind, he said, handing it to her, or if you just need help any kind, call that number, my assistant will answer day or night. Laya took it gently, studied it like it was a relic, then folded it and tucked it into a small inner pocket of her coat. Thank you, she said. Tyler reached out a hand and took hers. Will I see you again? He asked. Laya smiled. If you ever stop believing again, I'll probably be nearby. Tyler grinned and wrapped his arms around her. It was the first hug she'd received in over a year. She stood slowly, straightening the loose thread on her sleeve. You should go, the old woman said, her tone warm but firm. The boy has taken his first step, now he must walk his road. Franklin nodded, pushing the wheelchair slowly, though Tyler insisted on walking a few paces, leaning on the arms for balance. He didn't say much on the way home, but his eyes were light with a fire Franklin hadn't seen since before the accident. That night, as the skyline of Chicago glowed like a promise outside their condo window, Franklin sat at his son's bedside. I can't explain it, he whispered, watching Tyler drift into sleep, but I'll never forget it. He turned the business card over in his hand, wondering what would become of Laya, of the old woman, of that warm room beyond the alley. Somewhere in a different part of the city, Laya sat beside a girl no older than 6, who hadn't spoken since her mother left 3 months earlier. Laya didn't ask questions, she didn't offer solutions, she simply took the child's hand and hummed the same tune her grandmother had once sung. Because healing, she had learned, didn't always begin with answers, sometimes it began with presence, with silence, with staying. A week passed, then too the late October chill deepened across Chicago. Leaves scattered like forgotten letters on the pavement. Franklin Hayes noticed how differently the wind sounded when it wasn't carrying dread. His mornings no longer started with the mechanical hiss of a wheelchair, but with the cautious thud of Tyler's steps against hardwood floors. Each day, the boy walked farther, first across the living room, then down the hall, then from the elevator to the sidewalk and back, not flawlessly, not without stumbles, but with growing certainty. His therapists, who had long since adopted a tone of polite hopelessness, now watched in disbelief as Tyler described feeling in his calves, tingling in his thighs, a strange sense of returning. Franklin had tried to explain what happened once at the Children's Hospital in Hyde Park. In a room full of specialists, their response had been a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and thinly veiled dismissal. Psychosomatic response, one doctor said, perhaps a reactivation of dormant motor function triggered by trauma-induced stimulation. Another added, none could explain why the first signs of movement came not after a clinical procedure, but from a stranger's touch and a child's belief. Franklin stopped trying to justify it. Some things, he decided, just are. And what mattered wasn't how Tyler had started walking again, but that he had. One cold afternoon, Franklin returned early from a board meeting. He found Tyler in the living room practicing small, slow squats with a resistance band. The boy looked up, grinning, cheeks flushed from effort. "Guess what?" he asked. "Coach Parker said I might be able to try out for junior basketball in the spring. He said I have motor memory on my side." Franklin smiled, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Laya, about the tiny figure with worn-out shoes and an old soul, whose words had cracked open a door no doctor could force. He realized then that he couldn't let her disappear into the city's folds like smoke and wind. That evening, he called the number on the card he'd given her a week past, no answer. He tried shelters, soup kitchens, churches on the south side. He walked streets he hadn't walked in years, asked questions he'd once believed were beneath him. No one knew where she'd gone. Some remembered the girl with the too big hoodie and kind eyes, others said she used to hum songs that made even the angriest kids pause, but no one had seen her in days. "She comes and goes," a volunteer at a youth center on Ashland told him. "She's like a shadow with a heart, helps people, then vanishes." Franklin left his number, his name, his promise to help, still silence. Then one afternoon, as he drove past a row of shuttered storefronts near Roosevelt and Loomis, he saw a girl sitting on the curb, her back to the wall, arms wrapped around a younger boy. The boy's face was pale, his lip trembling, and his right arm cradled as if injured. "Laya!" Franklin pulled over so suddenly the tires screeched. He stepped out slowly, careful not to startle them. "Laya," he said, voice low. She looked up, startled at first, then smiled softly. "You found me." "I've been looking," Franklin said. "I couldn't stop thinking about you." Laya helped the little boy adjust his grip on his arm, then stood. "This is Jaden. He fell off a dumpster yesterday. Arm might be sprained. I've been keeping an eye on him." Franklin looked around. No adults, no phones, no help. "You can't keep doing this on the street," he said. "Let me help you, please." Laya shook her head. "This is where people hurt. It's where Grandma helped. It's where I'm supposed to be." "But it's not safe," Franklin pressed. "You're still a child. You think I don't want warm beds or food that's not from the back of a market," she interrupted gently. "I do, but the people I help, they have no one, and they trust me because I am one of them. They don't see a charity worker, they see another kid who knows what it means to go to sleep hungry, who knows what it feels like to be invisible." Franklin sighed, defeated, but deeply moved. "At least let me give you options," he said, "a place to go when it's too cold, somewhere safe. I'm not asking you to change your mission, just to not forget yourself in it." Laya looked at Jaden, then at Franklin. Slowly, she nodded. Okay, a number, maybe a key to somewhere safe, that's fair. Franklin handed her a folded envelope. There's a debit card in there, unlimited balance, it's yours, no questions asked. Also, a key to an apartment on the north side, fully stocked, just in case. Laya didn't thank him, not out of rudeness, but because she knew what real help looked like, not pity disguised as charity, but quiet, sustained presence. You know, she said after a moment, Grandma used to say the city's heart is loudest in its quietest places. I think that's what you heard that day, not me, just the heart. Franklin smiled, his throat tight. You remind me of someone I used to be before I got lost in steel and numbers. Laya laughed softly. Well, maybe you found your way back. They stood there, the unlikely pair, a millionaire and a beggar girl joined by something no ledger could tally. Will I see you again? Franklin asked. Laya tilted her head. Probably not how you expect, but if someone near you forgets how to believe, I'll probably be close. That night, Tyler stood on the stage at his school's fall concert, no wheelchair, no braces. He wore a blue blazer and khakis, his steps were slow, but his chin was high. When the principal asked him how he found the strength, he looked at his father, then into the crowd. A girl who believed I could, he said simply. And in an alley 5 miles away, Laya sat beside an old woman named Teresa, who hadn't spoken since her husband died the winter before. Laya didn't ask questions, she just hummed a tune older than memory, letting silence do what words often failed to. Because healing, as she'd learned, was less about fixing and more about presence. It was the stubborn act of sitting beside pain and saying, I see you, I'm not leaving. Franklin never found her again, not in person. But sometimes when he passed an alley or paused at a shelter, he'd hear humming and feel a warmth he couldn't explain. Tyler would stop, glance around, and smile. And they both knew somewhere close, the city's quietest heart was still beating, helping, watching, refusing to walk away. Brought to you by BUP Stories.